Hey, so this is a video series in which I made 6 games in 2 months. Please enjoy, please watch to the end to learn a little bit about a project that I will be working on. This video picks up on game 4. Game 4 taught me another valuable lesson. After game 3, I was feeling like I could make anything with enough time and energy. Right? You're never as bad as you think. I thought I was terrible. As I was continuing to make games, I felt as if I was doing everything wrong. I had no clue what I was doing. I was just so far off base. Most people don't know what they're doing, and the goal is to finish your game. The goal is to complete a project, not to be perfect. I never set out to be the perfect programmer. I never set out to be the perfect artist or the perfect game designer, because you're gonna get better, you're gonna get worse. But all that matters is that you produce something that is a representative of you. That's what's important. Project 4's mission statement was to create a game with my own assets in an open world. I wanted to drift more into an open world or action style. I wanted to get more into that type of world, because all of my games at this point had been very simple. I had avoided combat, dialogue, animations, all of these types of things that excite you, but I had avoided them up until this point. Making an open world game in 1 week is dumb. But granted, I wanted it to be very small. I wanted to create basically a large hub world that you can run around in as your character. I wanted to try again at modeling my character, which I did do better at. Created my own animations and my own 3D model. I had it working to some degree. Didn't look great, but mostly what I got out of this project was learning how to make assets. So from here, I was able to make trees, rocks, grass textures, all different types of things to make the game world actually look good. Halfway through the project 4, I just decided it would be much better if I just spent that week learning how to build assets and tools that I could use in other projects, because it was just so daunting to build those and then build the game logic. It wasn't working out. It's the least playable game because there's no win and loss, but I consider it a win because I completed the mission statement.
Mission complete!
Freaking if that makes sense. I was just building my library of skills, and game 4 definitely helped me do that. Yeah, so game 5. I went into game 5 excited. I was learning more about art and what I needed to do, but I feel like now I kind of had a realistic idea of what it was like to make a 3D game. And most of my experience, if you can call it that, has been in pixel art and sprites and 2D games. That's where my experience comes from before I started to learn any 3D game engines at all, was that. Drag and drop coding, Game Maker, Construct, Multimedia Fusion, to take it way back. Those were my experiences in game development up until that point. And I felt like making a 3D game in a week is just not possible with your own assets unless you're extremely talented, quick, and efficient. So I went into 2D for game 5.
Welcome, Kaiba, to Toon World!
Now the engine that I'm using is Unreal Engine. It's not known for its 2D, but if you're familiar with games like Octopath Traveler and maybe a handful of other games, you can do it. It is possible. I have made some pixel art in the past. I have made some pixel art games in the past in terms of starting them. Never finished anything. I have a basic understanding of how to do it. The idea for game 5, very simple. I wanted to make a 2D endless runner in the style of a side scroller. So if you've ever played Donkey Kong, you know the Minecart Madness levels. If you ever played Rayman, you know sometimes they have levels that are on rails. If you've ever played a beat 'em up game, sometimes they have 2D side scroller levels as well, in which you're riding in something. So Battletoads is known for their minecart level, for their turbo tunnel level. I wanted to make something like that you basically are traveling along a road and you have to dodge obstacles, but I wanted to make it endless. So that was really the biggest test for me, is actually a coding challenge this week. How do you make an endless procedural runner? I spent the first 3 days getting the mechanics of the procedural generation to work, then another day getting the stage to move and the player to move. Once I got that going, I was able to work on some ideas for the sprites and the level design. The game wasn't exactly perfect, but it was probably my most advanced feat from a mechanic perspective up to that point. I added the health system, I added the obstacles, I added some art that I needed, and it was looking somewhat good. I was learning more and more about how to complete a game easier. My project was starting to look better in terms of flow. It started to look better in terms of structure. My roadmap, everything was starting to click for me a little bit more in Game 5 in terms of understanding how to do this. I had a little bit more than a beginner's experience at this point. And it was great for me going into this project. Towards day 6, I got bit by the feature creep bug. As you make your game, you start to add more and more and more and more features into it. Before you know it, it's unrecognizable from what you planned, and that started to happen for me. I wanted the level to change, I wanted the obstacles to change, and the whole time I wanted you to be able to continue to play without having to stop until you die, and then your score adds up at the end. The idea of having a 2D sprite and a 3D environment just really started to stick with me, and that image and that style in terms of my skill set and what I could produce, it just seemed like the perfect match for me. And I was falling in love with it. I was like, whoa, this is dope, this is cool. I took the day to flesh out how a real game would look using the current prototype. I decided to add levels and mechanics and different sprites and different animations and different enemies and different obstacles. But as I began to plan that, I realized that this is not something that I can complete in 7 days. The game ballooned more and more. All that I had left was the original endless runner stage that I made, right? So what I settled for was the original project mission statement, which was the endless runner sprite-based game. Completed, done, packaged, finished that, right? Now that game isn't great, but I will come back to Game 5 in a minute. Game 6, people were still playing my Ludum Dare game entry, and I just wanted to develop more of an identity as a developer. I still suck at art, I don't have any combat experience in my game, so I wanted to dig in that direction, and hopefully soon I could start making an action game. Game 6 idea was a 2D beat 'em up game. The twist is it's not necessarily level based, it's sort of a wave based tower defense game in levels. So it's a 2D beat 'em up game in which you have to protect a object. That's your goal. I wanted there to be about 3 levels, cool abilities and some cool enemies, and then that would be it. So a 2D beat 'em up game in the style of Game 5 in terms of there being 3D assets and 2D sprites. The game was not only difficult, it was the hardest game I had made up to that point. One thing I've learned from Game 6, you never stop learning. There's always new rules, there's always updates, there's always something new, there's always something new you're trying to do. And you're always going to be learning. It's a constant learning, and that doesn't end. Even if you may feel somewhat competent, you still will have to be a student. And I was learning the whole way through while also working on what it is that I needed to. From a mechanics point, it is the most complicated game that I've made after Game 5. It's not perfect or as polished as I would hope from an overall design perspective, but I would say outside of Game 3 and Game 5, this is probably my most fun game that I've made, but also my most complete game that I've made. Right, I actually put effort into the main screens and animations and the music. I'm just getting better, and I think it shows in this game the most. And it also shows in terms of what I'm able to create in terms of art and mechanics. This game is something that I would not be able to make 2 months ago. And here I am today doing it in 7 days. And it's just incredible to see if you put yourself to the test and you sit down and you actually practice and study and apply your knowledge at the same time, you can do incredible things. A ton of stretch goals were not completed for this game, but the basic mechanics of a fighting game and a level-based one with a tower defense mechanic to it was completed. and I think it looks the best out of any game I've made in terms of the art. I'm proud of this game. So that game, in terms of a side scroller based 2D 3D style game. But I will come back to game 5 in a minute. When I was working on Project 5, I decided to turn that into my first full release, and Project 6 I used to develop what I would want my action part of that to be. So it's almost like game 5 and game 6 are prototypes of what I would want to be in a full release project. So I did start in between 5 and 6 an entirely new project. It's totally separate from the Game a Week project, and it's going to use elements from Project 6 and Project 5 to become a full-length project of its own. This is not going to be a game in a week. It's not going to be in a month or 2 days or 5 minutes. This is going to be a project that I complete for however long it takes. And I don't plan on it being a year or however long, but I do want it to be my first game that I complete that represents who I want to be as a game designer. So I will be working on that project and making devlogs for that project and updating you guys on it. So going forward, I will continue to do Game a Week, but I will change it slightly because I'm sane now. Game a Week project, I will now be doing 2 games a month. So that gives me about 15 days, so about 5 more days each to polish. So the way I'm looking at it, you could spend about 7 days implementing your game, and you could spend about 5 polishing it, and that gives you enough time to put together a very short game that is a completed project. And as I get better at it, I probably will get better at making the game look finished, and that's my goal. I want these games to look better than maybe the first game I made. And I think the first game I made is very indicative of what a game made in a week is expected to be. But a couple more days, you can get a lot further. So that's where I'm trying to go. Game in a week and a half. So that's where I'm going from here. I still think the goal is to master releasing and finishing games, but mostly I'm doing it to learn. And I am. I'm learning a lot. I'm learning so much more than I ever thought I could. I'm actually making games. I can consider myself an indie game developer at this point in just 2 months. And that's something that I never thought I'd be able to say. I figured it would take me years, but here I am. Appreciate you checking it out. Hopefully you learned something about finishing a game and packaging a game. Any tips I can give, I will add to in the future. So stay tuned to watch me struggle. I appreciate it. Peace.